Book one of all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest, one of our advocacy amplifying trust in leaders, teams, and organizations, none other than Miss Julie Holunga. Welcome,
Hi.
welcome, Miss Julie on Book One Review. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Sure. My name is Julie Holunga. I'm a fractional leadership and culture partner working with leaders, teams, and organizations to make conflict constructive, to address that conflict by giving feedback uh, that works and communicating with clarity. And by doing that, my clients build trust continually and hone that trust in order to make their lives easier.
Make their life easier. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world, Miss Julie. Thank you. So today let's talk about instead of avoiding it, make conflict constructive. When most people hear workplace conflict, they get tense. How do you
Mhm.
personally reframe conflict from something to fear into something to engage?
Well, there are two aspects we can look at. One is that when we avoid conflict and we sweep it under the rug, that rug becomes bigger and bigger and we end up tripping on it. So anyone who says like I'm not going to deal with it, I'm going to let it go, but they're holding on to it, then that is typically a sign that they're not letting it go and they're bringing it up later on, or they're still talking about it, or they're still thinking about it. It's not serving them. It's a distraction. It maybe is taking away from their brain space to think about other projects or to be innovative, and they can't do it because they are distracted by this. On the other hand, when we address conflict constructively, what we see happening is that this is when the best solutions come to be, whether it's being innovative or it's finding a different approach to a problem, is when we have that healthy conflict. And so if people can see that none of us like it, none of us like having those hard conversations, but if you can see this is going to help me out in the end or is going to make my life easier at some point, they tend to lean into it, even when it's uncomfortable. And what I always share with people is that the benefit is that when you deal with it, maybe not right exactly in the moment, but you give it a day or two, that you are no longer being held hostage by that conflict. So you're not waking up in the middle of the night, you're not solely focusing on that, but you address it. And 9 times out of 10, it's better than you anticipated. It might not be easy, but it's better than you anticipated.
Better than you anticipated, people. So, can you share a story where conflict you initially dreaded become a critical breakthrough for a project or relationship? What changed?
Well, what I see happens is that people hold on to something. They don't address the conflict. They hold on to some emotion, frustration, anger, disbelief, whatever it might be. And then it grows and it grows and it grows like an avalanche. And when they finally have that conversation, they say to me, I wish I'd just done that earlier. So this often comes up when people are thinking about uh, perhaps someone who's not performing well on a team. And this happened to a client of mine, had a direct report who was not performing, she would talk to him and he would pick up the pace, he would have some more urgency. He would, she said to him, I don't want to micromanage you. So he was on top of things and he was reporting back to her and keeping her abreast of what was going on. And what happens is in this case is that then that lasts for 2 or 3 weeks and then people go back to where they're comfortable. And what happens in this kind of instance with my clients is they finally get to the point that they say, okay, this is not working. This person is underperforming consistently. We can't have someone like that on our team. It's bringing the team down. And they either put the person on a PIP, or they transition the person out of the firm. And then they always tell me, I wish I had just done that sooner. And it happened with a client of mine that she had someone on her team that everyone liked as a human being, but he was the kind of guy who would say, oh, we tried that before and it didn't work, so we're not going to try it again. And he was really stuck in his ways, and he wasn't seeing the opportunities that were presenting themselves, and he wasn't bringing people in on the team that could help or could be creative with him, and he wasn't collaborating with others. And she really liked him as a person, so she tried to keep him on and tried to help him start performing the way they needed him to, and meet the expectations. And he didn't. So they ended up letting him go. And what she found out afterwards blew her mind, about people saying, "Oh, we told Tim that we could do this X, Y, and Z, but he didn't want to." So it wasn't just that he wasn't performing, he was holding other people back from performing. And so, although that was a really hard conversation, the amount of time that my client spent not only talking to me, but talking to others, thinking about it all the time, about trying to keep Tim on, it was far better if she had just given what we talked about was if she had just given herself, I'm going to give this a month. And if by January 1st he hasn't changed his ways, with giving feedback and setting clear expectations and communicating as much as I can, if he doesn't rise to the occasion, then I'm making a decision and letting him go. So that lack of addressing or having the conversations tends to pull people down. And instead, if they just have the conversation and lean into that conflict, good things can come.
Miss Julie, what is the most common misconception about constructive conflict that you have to outreach or unteach leaders or teams?
What I find the biggest misconception is that people think they're the only ones who don't like conflict or who avoid conflict. So
Hmm.
when we're in a room with peers and I ask some of these pointed questions, I often hear, "Oh, I didn't realize that. I just thought you enjoyed conflict." And what the difference is, and a misconception is that no one enjoys it, or very rare does someone enjoy it. The difference is how people approach conflict. It's a difference of style. So there's some people who want to prevent conflict from escalating. So they will build consensus. They'll talk to as many people as they can to prevent it from escalating. Then you have some people who, when conflict arises, or they, for instance, they hear that someone's mad at them, they want to go address it right away. And just they it takes so much energy for them to hold back and not address the conflict. But it takes just as much energy for them to hold back and not address conflict as it does for people who are, like I said, building that consensus, for them to lean in and have that hard conversation. So it's not easy for anyone. It takes a lot of energy, no matter where you fall on the spectrum.
Creating the container for safety. What are the non negotiable ground rules you set before diving into contentious decision to ensure it stays productive and not personal?
Right. So that's one of it, is to remind people that this is not about me or them as an individual, but it's as a collective. It's about the purpose for that team, what their priorities are, what their goals are. And I find myself consistently repeating, we're not talking about you, we're talking about the project. So staying focused not on the individual, but on the task at hand, whatever that goal or purpose is. And the safety comes into play. How I manage that is when someone throws out an idea that maybe is really far-fetched, or maybe other people don't agree with it, and someone jumps in and says, no, 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 there's no way we can do that. I shut that down and say, okay, that might be the case. We might not be able to do this, but let's keep this conversation going. Let's hear the idea fully before we shut it down. Because oftentimes there's some golden nuggets that are dropped that we might not be able to do that whole thing, but there might be something that we can pull out of that. And oftentimes when I hear people shut down an idea or shut down a person, that's more a reflection on them as a leader than the idea itself. So I will often, if we've all worked with people who are challenging at times, and I've certainly have had retreats or trainings where a leader is really shutting down everything that anyone who opens their mouth says. And I often will, not embarrass them, but try to engage them. And I will try to engage them maybe over a break and to ask them, hey, what's going on? How are you? I'm noticing that you're turning down ideas. What's going on here for you? And oftentimes I will find out something that hasn't been said. And then it's easier to say, oh, I hear you and I understand where you're coming from. For the purpose of our conversation today, can you hold back just for a moment and let the ideas come to the surface? And every time they're agreeable. I've had one who wasn't, but I say in 15 years, one is pretty good. Um, and really engaging them. So when they shut something down, to say, what are your concerns or what risks do you see? Because oftentimes it's not that they're really shutting down the idea, but they want to be heard and they want the attention. So rather than shutting them down, I try to get them more engaged. And oftentimes that will flip the switch for them. So the combination of talking to them privately and then engaging them in the group discussion.
Miss Julie, how do you build or identify a psychological safety necessary for people to engage in conflict without fear of relation?
Mhm. It's that same thing. It's staying focused on the task as opposed to the person, and setting agreements and revisiting those agreements. So if someone says, we're not going to accept, I will facilitate a discussion around what are the behaviors that we reward and what are the behaviors that we don't accept. And I will always have someone in the room who says, no, 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 we're not going to talk about poor behaviors. We just want to focus on the positive and being proactive. And I always say, oh, that's a really good point. Just play along with me here and let's talk about the behaviors we're not going to accept. So then if someone, let's say they say, we're not going to accept shutting down ideas. And then if someone shuts down an idea and really shuts down, closes or tries to close the conversation, I can go back and point to that and say, hey, we agreed that this is one of the behaviors that we're not going to allow. Do we still want that or do we need to shift it? And oftentimes people say, no, 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 you're right. We need to stay on this. And creating that psychological safety is, bottom line, is really allowing people to feel that they're heard and that they can contribute their ideas, while also reminding people just because you share an idea doesn't mean that it's going to be adopted or that action's going to be taken on it, but instead really helping them think through. Like, part of sharing is to get other people thinking creatively and building on ideas, not just we should go to this restaurant for dinner and we're going to order pizza for everyone. Right? It's not, but it's more building a swimming pool of ideas and then being able to build off of them to truly be innovative and problem solve.
A problem solve and the tools and techniques, Miss Julie, beyond active listening. What specific underrated communication technique that transform arguments into dialogues?
Yeah. Is really being an active listener, which is hard. One of the things that I recommend and have been researching is the power of questions. And so often we ask questions that we know the answers to, or we think we know the answer to. and instead to ask questions you don't know the answer to, which can be really uncomfortable for some people because we've been trained or educated to never put yourself in a position that you don't know the answer. But truly active listening is not interrupting. It's not just jumping on what someone else said and then shifting the focus of the conversation back to themselves. So I notice this a lot when people talk about vacations. I experienced this yesterday. Someone was sharing, "Oh, we're going to Italy next summer." And I said, "Oh, where are you going to go?" And she said, "We're going to go to Rome and Florence." And I said, "Oh, I love Florence." And then someone else says, "Oh, Rome's my favorite." And then someone else says, "Well, you know what you have to do is you have to go to this island and it's just like this." And all of a sudden the conversation shifted away from this woman planning this wonderful vacation to someone else talking about her vacation. Now, it's not bad. It wasn't awful. It's a light topic. But if you think about when you're having a difficult conversation, how do you create that psychological safety as the leader so that people feel that they can share and they can talk? So I have worked with many leaders, and what I share with them is you have to ask 3 questions before you're allowed to share your opinion, or let 3 other people share their insights before you share your own. But truly asking those questions that peel back the onion to understand, what are you interested in seeing in Rome? I always recommend and I like questions that start with what, because if you ask a question that starts with why, people tend to get defensive. So if I say to someone, "Why are you going to Rome?" versus "What are you interested in seeing or doing while you're in Rome?" It has a very different connotation and lands quite differently for people. And so it's a small tweak, using those what questions instead of why, that demonstrate listening and give people build that psychological safety in that moment and overall.
Interesting, Miss Julie. As amplifying trust in leaders, teams, and organizations, what are your short-term and long-term goals?
My long-term goals are to truly be an embedded partner inside organizations, just 2 or 3 organizations, where I can really help move, like redirect the ship in terms of when it comes to leadership and culture. So not saying, "Oh, we want a healthier culture here," but really being embedded so that when the challenges come up, when people are busy and revert to their old habits or their old behaviors, that I can be there to help facilitate discussion, facilitate and get past conflict that people maybe don't want to address. I've worked with uh, companies and firms where there may be a divisive um, nature because of a decision that was made or leadership changes. And people are not trained to do what I do inside any organization. Even the best of leaders can't do it. And so when I come in as a neutral party and I'm able to say, what's really going on here? What are we trying to achieve? The divisiveness may not go away, but it certainly diminishes. And I get people rowing in the same direction. And that's really what is exciting for me. And as I think of the impact that I want to have on this world, that is where I focus my attention. Short term, I'm thinking about I've done one TED Talk, but I would like to do another, and I'm really thinking and doing some research about that. And again, it's just finding those teams and organizations who are looking for that fractional partner to help them build their culture, build strong leadership. That's not just something they're, checking off a list, but truly living what they are talking about.
Good luck to your goals, Miss Julie, and looking forward for more success. And what will be your piece of advice for those people out there who want to be like you?
Well, I would say is to get out there and listen as much as you can to what people are experiencing, and you'll start to hear themes. of what's going on in people's world, and to really be present when you're talking to prospective clients about what they need, and not thinking like, oh, I've done this before, I'm just going to do the same thing, because no organization, no leader is exactly the same, but truly listening. And that's what differentiates me from my colleagues, is that I truly listen to what people are saying, and I don't have an off the shelf solution, but I customize every single thing I do for all of my clients.
Well, thank you for that advice, Miss Julie. And can you please recommend a book or books that influence your journey?
Sure. So I love the book Atomic Habits, and highly recommend that in terms of just thinking about who you want to be as a professional, but also as a human being. And that's by James Clear. And the other book that really changed things, not only for myself personally, but for my clients, is The Source by Dr. Tara Swart. I think both of those are just fantastic reads, and very easy to put into action quickly.
Put into action. I like that, Miss Julie. And thank you for the recommended books. So, how do you help people, what do you call this? People that depersonalize feedback and critique so it fuels growth rather than resentment?
Right. So, what I always share with people when they are receiving feedback is to be grateful for it, because I mean, 99% of the people I work with say that they want more feedback, that they don't get enough actionable feedback. And from the other perspective, the person giving feedback, is to make sure that there is a trusting relationship first. If you don't have that foundation, that's when people become resentful. And to think of feedback as part feedback, but also forward facing advice. So if feedback feels awkward, or perhaps you've given feedback and the person isn't changing, to try a different tactic and not keep banging your head against the wall, and say, next time you present, I recommend that you practice your transitions. Or next time we're in a client meeting, I really would like you to speak up and share the risks that you're seeing. So you're giving them tangible advice of what they actually need to do going forward. And oftentimes, if someone is resentful or pushing back on receiving feedback, when they receive advice, that seems to land and sit better with them. So to try both the feedback and the forward advice.
Can you describe a conflict autopsy, a way to reflect on a disagreement after the fact to improve the process of the next time?
Yeah. So what I always recommend is it's a 3-to-1 ratio. So if there's been conflict, if something didn't go well, if you found yourself in a position that was not what you anticipated or planned, practice this 3-to-1. And this was developed by a sports psychologist at the University of Utah. And 3 things that went well. And it can be small things, I showed up on time, or it can be big things, that I had all the data I needed. And then this is the key thing: one thing you can do better next time. So even if something went really well, to reflect this 3-to-1 is helpful as well. So one thing that can be even better. So notice I didn't say one thing that went wrong, but instead one thing that could be better. And what that does is it changes your mindset to see, well, yeah, we can all do things better next time, but not to beat yourself up on what didn't go well, but instead, what is something I'm going to do next time even better?
Even better, indeed. And Miss Julie, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too, comedy 101 in third season, and my food 101 in sixth season, people, geography 101, love letters Movie 101 review, Music 101 fourth season, Science 101, Sex 101 in second season, and My Baby Podcast, Law 101, Mental Health 101. Bible Verses 101, and coming this December, Entrepreneur 101. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Julie, ultimately, if we successfully make conflict constructive, what positive people or ripple effects do we see beyond the immediate problem?
Yeah, well, it really takes focus and deliberate focus and leadership. So, what I say to people all the time is just pause for a moment, just take a breath, pause, think about what's going on, think about the emotions, the thoughts that you are bringing to that particular situation. And what's the reality and what's the story that you're telling yourself. And when people take a moment to just pause, they're able to say, "Oh, I'm carrying this over from something that happened 10 years ago," or "I am expecting that this person's going to perform a certain way and they're not. But is that on me? Like, what could I do differently? What am I bringing and contributing to this conflict?" And sometimes it's nothing, but it allows you to pause, and then, as we talked about before, to recognize when if someone is behaving poorly, that's a reflection on them, and for you to walk away from that and not to be part of that, not to get sucked into someone's whirlwind of poor behavior.
Miss Julie Holunga, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you explain to us what is a fractional leadership and culture partner? What it's all about, Miss Julie?
So it's I work with clients in 3 different levels. One is there's a specific problem, we've got to fix it, and I come in and help them. Or perhaps it's something that they have a retreat, or they want to invest in particular level of leaders, and I come in and do a institute, leadership institute. Or they want an embedded partner where I come in for a year or more and really handhold and customize depending on what comes up and what they need.
Interesting, Miss Julie. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business, your advocacy, or whatever projects that you're doing right now?
Sure. So I always recommend people to check out my website, which is julieholunga.com, or to connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter once a month that is action oriented, but really helps leaders think about how they can be more of a deliberate leader.
A deliberate leader. Yes, people support Miss Julie Holunga because if you support her, for sure, more and more empowering advocacy like this to come. So, Miss Julie, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Daniel.
Bodycom people, see you soon.